Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the Robotics 24/7 podcast. This is Tim Culverhouse, Editorial Director of Robotics 24/7 at Peerless Media, and today we'll be discussing another layer of the robotics industry. Now, we've seen a massive influx in robotics company launches, product developments, and deployments over the last decade. But how do these organizations secure the funding necessary to create these innovations? Today's podcast dives into the funding and investment side of robotics, and I'm thrilled to welcome my guest to the program to discuss the role of venture capital in the robotics industry and the economics of robotics. Fady Saad is the co-founder and general partner of Cybernetics Ventures, a leading venture capital firm investing in early-stage robotics and physical AI. Headquartered in Boston, the firm is led by Fady Saad and Mark Martin, who have 50 years of combined robotics technologies, operating, and investing experience. Cybernetics invests in industry-critical opportunities across North America and Europe. Focus vertical markets include advanced manufacturing, logistics, construction, healthcare, agriculture, energy infrastructure, defense, dual use, and space. Fady, thanks so much for joining me today and discussing the economics and the venture capital side of robotics. I'm thrilled to have you on board.
Thank you, Tim. It's my pleasure.
So, Fady, as we jump into the conversation today, the first question that I have for you is, how does Cybernetics Ventures find prospective organizations to invest in? And then, as a follow-up to that, what's the timeline look like from the initial interest from Cybernetics to the investment portion of the contract and the program?
Oh, Thank you for the question, Tim. We have been very fortunate that we have been in the robotics space for a long time. We actually organically came out of the robotics community because we saw the need and the gap for early stage funding for robotics companies. This is even before robotics become mainstream as we are seeing today. So we were very fortunate to have a very established network within key players, key organizations in the robotic space, and have also an established brand and credibility that basically created an inbound dynamics. We have founders, we have co-investors reach out to us, but we also maintain very strong network with key organizations and incubators and accelerators and key people in the community. But I mean, some examples, for example, we invested in Raise Robotics out of the West Coast. And short little story here, we learned about Raise from Jeff Bernstein, the president of A3. And Jeff came and vouched for the company and the founder and said, you know what, Gary is a great guy. He knows a lot about the space. And I would love for you to meet with him. And it happened that we were at an event in the West Coast, and Jeff kind of facilitated an introduction, and I met Gary and Connolly, and we hit it off. And a couple of months later on, we invested in Raised Robotics, and the company is doing very well. Another company here in Boston, Dash Bio, they are automating lab and clinical trials. And the way we learned about the company was featured in an article in the Wall Street Journal, and one of our team members also was a contributor to the article. So we asked for introduction. The reporter made the connection, and we also have been investing in Dash, and Dash Bio has been doing very well. Real-time robotics and other companies. I've known the founders since my time at Mass Robotics when I co-founded the organization back in 2014. So those are teams that I have seen coming to Mass Robotics and kind of growing their team, using the facility, and I stayed in touch. And so I have a deep kind of relationship and understanding of those teams. Enigma, for example, Reese and VJ, they founded American Robotics before that, and they was probably the earliest resident at Mass Robotics, and they had a successful exit for American Robotics. So I've known the folks since 2017. And when they were starting Enigma, they came to us. We had a discussion, and definitely we were among the early investors in the company. So this is basically how it kind of happens, and kind of relationship with Harvard. So Verve spin out from the lab. We have good relationship with folks at WPI, Northeastern, MIT, and also beyond that in CMU and the West Coast, and even all the way to Germany and Switzerland.
One thing that we get, and I get the opportunity to write about a lot, is kind of that initial funding element from, something that an organization, say that Cybernetics Ventures has invested in, or just anybody in the robotic space. And I'm curious from your side of the table, Fady, how cybernetics kind of tracks, and I want to use the word progress here, but I don't know if that's the right term, but how are you monitoring the progress of the organizations that you've invested in? What are some of the things that you're looking for in terms of that investment to ensure that it's being used in the way that it will help develop and navigate all of the things that you're looking for as part of your role in the venture capital side of organizations?
I mean, early stage investment is definitely very different than late stage investment. And the reason is when a company is still young, it's very fragile, and very small decisions could make a huge impact on the future of the company. So that's why staying close to those companies is important. Because of our deep knowledge about the robotic space, the formula of building and scaling successful robotics companies is not yet widely known. That's why we invested the time to write down and publish the robotic startup playbook, which you can find on our website. But this was a modest attempt to codify all what we have known about the robotic space and the many data points, the many companies that we have seen over the last 2 decades or so, and what it takes to build and scale a successful robotic company. So our model, Mark and I, we decided from the beginning, in order to make successful investment in the space, not only select good companies, but we want to make them great. And in order to do that, we need to stay close, we need to be hands-on, we take board seats, we take observer seats, and even if we don't have any representation on the board, we stay close, we have regular calls with the teams at least quarterly. We have an internal tracking tool for we call it the vital signs of the company. So headcount, revenues, cost, runways, this kind of churn, these kind of data that give us a sense of how is the company is doing in terms of optimizing the use of their capital and in a kind of selling and scaling their product and so forth. When you go to a doctor and they get the vital signs. I mean, the vital signs are the vital signs. You need someone to make sense of that. What does it mean? What kind of indication this could be pointing to? And this is what we do. That's why we have weekly meeting for portfolio follow-up internally. We look at the vital signs. Mark and I and the rest of the team, we update each other about what's happening because we assign the portfolio to each partner so that there is some sort of an accountability. We update each other about what's going on and try to think about, okay, what can we do? Maybe one or two things that will dramatically help the company and improve the performance and the odds of them to be successful. For out of these meetings, we think about the larger network, the Cybernetics Collective, which is the internal platform we have for service providers and corporates, how we can utilize that to help our portfolio companies. And then every quarter we have the Cybernetics Collective call. This is a call that we bring the founders, we bring our advisory board, I mean, phenomenal people with tons of experience in the space. And then we also bring the corporates and the service providers. We bring everyone together. We update each other about what's going on, and then we pick a topic that's relevant for the founders that we discuss. I mean, sometimes it's fundraising, other times pitching, then go-to-market strategies, and sometimes it's more personal, how to become an effective CEO. We had one of the calls and we invited Ray Stata, the founder and former CEO of Analog Devices. He came and shared his wealth of experience of how to become a CEO and how to be effective in what you're doing. So this is what we're doing. We like to build that relationship with the founders. We do believe founders are the souls of the companies. It's very important to nurture that and take care of them.
I heard the word relationship used a lot in your conversation there, Fady, and it makes sense from that collaborative element where it's not just an investment and then check back in. It seems like from what Cybernetics Ventures is doing, there really is not hand holding necessarily, but that back and forth open door policy where you're maintaining the relationships with these organizations as soon as that investment starts, and even going off of the examples that you used before any investment happens. It seems like it's a very symbiotic opportunity from both the cybernetics side and the any of the organizations that you've invested in.
It is true. It is true. The other thing we do is both Mark and I, we are not the typical venture capitalists. We are operators. I mean, Mark spent 30 years at Analog Devices running different business units and very well established. He was like acquiring companies, spinning out companies, investing in companies. I started my career working in large corporate, Siemens, Nokia. Then I co-founded companies and then worked in a mid-sized companies. So we both have seen what it takes to build and scale a company. So we rely a lot on this kind of experience, and I think many of our founders find that it's very useful in the kind of day-to-day decisions they make. Relationship is definitely important. The whole kind of venture building and investing is a heavy relationship business.
So we're recording this podcast in the middle of May 2026, and as of now, Cybernetics Ventures, you've made 31 investments in 18 different portfolio companies. We listed some of the target areas and industries that Cybernetics is involved in investments from advanced manufacturing, logistics, construction, etc. And I guess we're in 2026. You discuss a lot in the article that will coincide with the release of this podcast about the defining decade of robotics. And I'm curious how, or I guess what types of technology companies or even technology in general is Cybernetics Ventures focused on for the remainder of 2026 and the near future?
So, Tim, we when we created the fund, we had certain convictions. So back in 2019, 2020, we knew that labor shortage is an issue. We knew that increased consumer demands for kind of customized products and deliveries and even medication and vaccines and surgeries and all of that. And the fact that there is trillions of dollars of problems out there that we cannot, there's no way that we can solve these problems manually. I mean, from water to housing to climate to I mean, you name it. So there's no doubt that the demand is there and the need is there. So the question was, if robotics is happening no matter what, then what makes sense to invest in? And it's a question of size and it's a question of timing. You want to pick the problems that are large enough to justify investment. And you want also to invest in problems that timing wise, you're not too early and you're not too late. And when you think about that, you need to always time yourself around what's going on around you. So, I mean, there's AI, there's data centers, there's space activities, there is developments happening in quantum, there is geopolitical activities happening, there is food and nutrition shortage. So when you think about these kind of things, you start thinking, okay, where are we in terms of products and in terms of companies that are being formed to solve some of these problems? And then when you think about it, you realize that, okay, some of these big problems, in order to be solved, you need to have machines that have the intelligence that can handle these kind of things efficiently. And in order to build intelligence, everyone knows that we need the data. So then data collection technologies for smart machines become very important. We have the web for the kind of language and knowledge, but we don't have the robotics web. We don't have this physical world data yet. However, vertically focused companies and robotics companies is accumulating this data. That's why I think there's a huge data play for those companies in the future because they have access to data that, I mean, no other platforms would have for physical data. And then assuming that you have the data, eventually you want robots to move from a single purpose to maybe a multi-purpose. So then you want to create some sort of a foundational robotics kind of model. This is the holy grail that many people are working on. I mean, getting to a general purpose foundational model might be a little bit tricky, but I think we can have a multi-purpose. I think the jump from a single purpose to a general purpose is a big jump. I think we can jump from a single purpose to a multi-purpose, considering the challenges we have in terms of the data and kind of understanding of some of these physical problems. And then you realize that Many of the manual problems now, they are manual because they require a high dexterous motion. And this has been an issue in the space. I mean, the human hand is a phenomenal creation with flexibility, with sensing, with intelligence. Even like we can sense coins in our pocket and decide which one we want, right? Without even seeing them, just all kind of tactile sensing. So dexterity is definitely one of the big problems in robotics, and there are tons of companies trying to solve this problem with different approaches. So these are some of the areas that we have been looking at when you think of a technology. But obviously, in terms of verticals, I mentioned some of the verticals that we're looking at just because of the demand, because you need also to read the verticals and which markets and industries are pulling. Like, for example, defense in the last few years have been pulling a ton of robotics activities. Cybersecurity is something very interesting for us, and we actually made an investment in a company called Corsia, a phenomenal company because having cybersecurity for robotics is very different than any other cybersecurity. How you can have a machine-to-machine cybersecurity and have you minimize the exposure of your network as you deploy more robots into your infrastructure. Humanoids, obviously, I mean, we have been kind of watching the space cautiously. There is definitely different school of thoughts. We have not made any investments in humanoids yet. We have been monitoring this space, but it's definitely a trend. We are not ignoring them, and we keep an eye on what's happening there.
Well, without giving out too many state secrets, I greatly appreciate the in-depthness of that answer and the strategy that cybernetics follows. And from our side of the table, again, following the news from the funding and the organizations that you've already given secured the investment with, it's interesting to kind of hear that forward-looking approach, Fady. So thank you so much. Another question that I had for you, and this is related to a portion of the article that you wrote, again, called The Venture Capital and Investment View from Inside Robotics Defining Decade. You'll have a link to it in the podcast transcript here. But you mentioned some involvement from major organizations around the world, the Amazons, the NVIDIAs, Googles, SoftBanks, Hyundais of the world. And I'm curious how their involvement in the investment side has changed Cybernetics Ventures' approach to early stage investment? Or I guess the other part of that question is, does this even change your approach to early stage investment with some of these global, multi-billion dollar, possibly trillion dollar organizations getting involved in early stage robotics investment?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it really changed our investment approach, at least yet, but those are big companies and leaders in their sectors that we stay informed on the activities of those companies. We keep monitoring their investments, their acquisition, their announcements. We have internally a very strong systematic way of keeping an eye on what's happening. And we have a lot of relationship with key people in those companies, decision makers, and we meet regularly in events and kind of special meetings we hold. And we compare notes about what's happening in the space, their appetite, what are the things they're looking at, what are some of the strategies they are looking at. And this informs our investment activities and also feed into guidance and feedback we give to our portfolio companies about sectors they should be looking at. Like just to give you an example, Rugged Robotics, one of the companies we invested in out of Texas, Houston, they developed this robot that go and print construction layout on the floor. I mean, phenomenal technology and kind of huge efficiency in doing this work. And the company started performing services in the construction space. And while they were doing that, they figured out that there is huge opportunities in the warehouse construction and data centers construction. So it's still construction, but it's a some sort of a variation of the space. And as you can imagine, those are huge market opportunities. And with a slight of a pivot, they managed to capture lots of opportunities there without mentioning which companies they were involved in, but some of the big companies in the space. and suddenly you are unlocking a multi-million dollar market opportunity. So this is how you monitor kind of activities happening from the movers and shakers in terms of large corporates, and you kind of direct your companies, or at least give them feedback to adapt their strategies and pivot into some of these evolving market opportunities.
The last question that I had for you today, Fady, and again, being for Peerless and Robotics 24/7 being located outside of Boston and Cybernetics being headquartered in downtown Boston, coming up on, I believe, my third attendance at the Robotics Invest event coming up. That'll be May 26th and 27th in Boston, and then
Yeah.
also Robotics Invest as part of Robotics Tech Week, which will be May 26th through 29th in and around Boston, featuring demos, tours of mass-based robotics organizations, all the different sessions that are coming up with that. So we'll link to that in the transcript here. But as now we make our way into 2026 Robotics Invest, and then now the next part of Robotics Tech Week, how has the event changed? How has it expanded to become a full week of different things that happen that cybernetics is involved in? And what
Yeah.
would you say the conversations have changed over since the first Robotics Invest to where we are now in 2026?
So just going back a few years when we started Robotics Invest, the genesis was very simple. When we started Cybernetics Ventures, we looked around and we said, okay, where can we find founders and investors, and how can we compare best practices and ways to build and scale successful robotics companies? Where does kind of group come together? And we looked around and we couldn't find any event out there. I mean, there are great events happening. I mean, Robo Business and Robotics Summit and Automate and Modix and all these kind of great expos and shows. They show the technology, the products, but they don't discuss investment, they don't discuss venture building, they don't discuss like how really to build and scale successful robotics company. I do believe that this is a need, because when you look at the history of humanity, I mean, in order to create a repeatable kind of successful generation of companies and industry, people in this industry, they need to come together on a regular basis and compare notes. I mean, this is sociology. This is how civilizations, this is how successful group of humans come together and build something meaningful. So we took it on ourselves. We said, you know what, let's design an event that do exactly that. And we said we wanted to be small. We want to invite the right people. We want people to be focused on the goal, which is how we can build and scale the next generation of robotics unicorn. This is even kind of spelled out on the website of Robotics Invest. And we also wanted to make it clear that this is not a cybernetics annual meeting. It's not our annual general meeting for our portfolio companies and LPs and so forth. No, we don't shy away from leading it, but we also kind of invite other investors. We invite other organizations to join forces us and kind of create this experience. And we paid very close attention to the topics and whom to invite. We wanted to invite people who had successful exits, successful companies, successful experiences in the space, and give them the stage time, because those are the people that we want to hear from. And unfortunately, many times those folks, they get buried in more kind of product marketing, presentation sessions, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to build a generation of successful robotics companies, you want to get the people who made it and the investors who back them up, and listen to what were the key decisions and how did you manage to do that. So the first event we had, obviously the founders of Kiva, huge exit, one of the first successful exits in the robotics industry. So we had Mick Mounts and Peter Warman, who's also one of our advisors at Cybernetics. And second year we had Mark Gravert. I mean, Boston Dynamics had kind of multiple acquisitions. We can argue whether this is a successful company or not, but definitely it's a big company, big name. And last year we had the CEO of ClearPath, Matt Rundell. and also phenomenal acquisition by Rockwell Automation. This year, we are bringing SoftBank to speak about all the acquisitions. They acquired ABB. They have been acquiring different companies, investing in different companies. So obviously a big player and a big kind of capital deployer in the space. But also we're inviting Gavin Keneally, who is the CEO of Ghost Robotics, a company that had a successful exit, but we don't hear a lot about it. It's a unique story. But those are the kind of companies that we want to hear from, and we want to know what made those companies successful. So this year it will be the fourth year, and we always kind of like 2 years ago we had a debate around humanoid. We had two people pro humanoid, two people against humanoid. We had a reporter from Forbes kind of moderating this panel, and it was an amazing conversation. So this year also we have some interesting surprises, some interesting discussions. We have a panel on the global landscape of robotics, obviously what's happening in China and Europe and other places. We have a panel on the dual use of robotics and so forth. Last year we said, you know what, we get a lot of people from outside of Massachusetts to fly to come to Boston, and even folks coming internationally. I mean, we have even folks coming from Japan to come and attend. So the event has become a magnet for lots of people who are interested in the topic. And we said, you know what, maybe we create a full experience, a full week, where not only you listen to these conversations and network and have the roundtable conversation, but you also go and see successful companies in the area. You go to meet with other VCs and other organizations. So we said, let's create a whole week, the Robotics Tech Week, anchored by Robotics Invest. And last year, we were hoping that we will have one event every day. We ended up having 17 events. It was phenomenal. And actually, we were very surprised. This year, probably we'll get close to 20 events or more. And we are a founding host of the A16Z Tech Week. So there's tons of activities happening in Boston during this week. Yeah, we are very excited, and we continue to kind of push this forward, and we get a ton of positive feedback from attendees, and we try every year to make it better than the previous year.
Well, as an attendee and a journalist that gets the opportunity to see what's going on at Robotics Invest and Robotics Tech Week, it's very exciting to cover it and kind of get those intimate conversations that happen at those events with the folks that are there, the speakers, the attendees, the exhibitors. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to attend, but then also to talk to you today, Fady. It was great to have this conversation, to dive into some of the nuance related to the investment segment in robotics, diving inside some of the writing that you did again for the article that you were so kind to put together. So I greatly appreciate your writing, your time today, and I look forward to continuing to hear of the latest involvements, investments, and ongoings related to cybernetics ventures, Fady. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim, very much.
And thank you so much for listening to this special edition of the Robotics 24/7 podcast. Don't forget to download and subscribe to the Robotics 24/7 podcast on the podcast platform of your choosing. Look forward to the next episode of the Robotics 24/7 podcast series. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye bye.